Hey guys, today I want to show you how we can bring data from a third-party system into Teamforms with help from Microsoft Power Automate. Now in this video we're going to pull data from an SQL database, but you can just as easily use the same steps to pull data from any of the 1,000+ supported connectors like Dynamics, SAP, or even an internal company API. So the first thing we need to do is synchronize the data from our SQL database or third-party system into a single .json file in SharePoint. Now this can be done with 3 simple steps. First, we set up a reoccurring trigger to run every hour or every 30 minutes, depending on your requirements. Then we request the data from SQL or the third-party system and simply write that data to a .json file in SharePoint. Now, by taking this approach, we not only make the data easily accessible to Teamforms, but it also means we can use SharePoint's role-based access control to govern who can access that data. Alright, let's try to build that workflow together from scratch. So the first thing I'll do is open Microsoft Power Automate from my web browser, and we'll create a new workflow from scratch. For the trigger, I'm going to use a reoccurring schedule, so we'll search for schedule, and I can see a reoccurrence, and we'll set this to trigger every hour. Next, we'll add in an action to get the data from SQL, so we'll search for SQL. Under See More, there should be a Get Rows action. So from here, I can enter in an SQL server. And for the database, I'll select my sample database. And for the table, I want to populate my form with products. So we'll look for the products table. Now, if your SQL table has a huge number of rows, you can actually go into settings here and enable this pagination option and set the threshold to something quite large. So the final step we want to do is to go and create a file in SharePoint that'll house the data returned from SQL. So we'll search for SharePoint, and under See More, we should get a Create File action. So in here, let's go ahead and select my example team. Under the folder path, I want the folder to just be created in the standard shared document library. So shared documents, and we'll call it products.json. For the contents, we need to click this function option, and under dynamic content, we want body/value. So what that is the array that's returned from the SQL action. So click Add. And now one final step we need to do is under settings, we want to disable chunking. Now what that will do is it will make this create file action act more like a create or update file. Alright, let's rename this workflow to Sync SQL to SharePoint. And we'll hit save. Alright, lastly, we'll just check that this workflow is working. So it's currently running. We can click on that run and see it load. And you can see that the workflow has run successfully. Let's go ahead now and jump back into Teamforms. So back here in Teamforms, I'm going to modify my quote template. What we ultimately want to do is populate this SharePoint dropdown with the products from SQL. And when someone selects a product, it's going to automatically populate the unit price based on what's in the database. The first thing we need to do is actually set up the data source from the data source screen. I'll click Add and call it Products. Now for the type, we want to use a SharePoint file, and we'll select the file that we set up earlier and hit save. So now you can see it's synchronized down the records that are from SQL. Jumping back into my form, I can go to the SharePoint dropdown that I dragged into my form earlier, click Edit, and then in the Data tab, go ahead and select the Products data source, and we'll use the name to populate the dropdown. There we go, that's exactly what I want. Now hit Save. For the unit price, we want to make that calculated based on the product. So the first thing I'll do is I'll look at the API tab, which shows it's called Product, and I can actually preview what a record looks like here. So we have each product has all these different properties that I can use, but what I really want is the cost. The cost is the standard cost here. So if I want to access this particular record, what I can do is use a calculated value. So we'll go into unit price, data, calculated values, and I can say value equals row, because we're inside of a data grid, dot product dot standard cost. If you're interested in learning a bit more about calculated values, there's a YouTube video on this topic. So I'll hit save and preview. So now when I select a product, it's automatically setting the unit price. So today we've run through the entire process of synchronizing some data from a third-party source and populating a record inside our form. On top of that, we've used a calculated value to automatically set the price based on the SQL record. That's all for today, but I hope you guys have found this helpful. Thanks for watching. If you guys want to see more content like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.